So I just got finished listening to this debate. The debate was between Cynthia G, TAZ, the exclusive, and I believe Nyla Says was the moderator. She came in about the 30-minute mark or whatever. It was a 3-hour debate. I just got through with it. First of all, I love to see men and women, especially black men and women, have a debate that doesn't, have a lot to do with, yelling and screaming and disrespect. Even though I thought the comments, me personally, I felt like there were a lot of supporters, and it's kind of like, when you get your supporters in there, it's kind of like, I'm rooting for the person I'm rooting for, and I'm not listening objectively. And so I felt like that was kind of, I don't know if I guess Cynthia has more supporters than Taz, so you can kind of see the shift in there. It was kind of like, oh, he's making excuses, or he don't know what he's talking about. And, even though there were some very key points made by Taz, but what I wanted to say was it's interesting in these debates because it's almost like when the question is proposed, what are black men doing to actually take power, take power back, like to build communities, to build your generational wealth, to be equal or greater than, and we talked about, I didn't talk about, they talked about, this leverage that white people seem to have over black people, and they went into the whole thing with the Constitution and how the Constitution, wasn't for black people, et cetera, et cetera. So like I said, a lot of good points. But here's my thought process about the whole thing. Anybody that says that white Americans did not have a head start would be foolish. You know what I'm saying? And it's difficult to say that you've had a head start. I'm going to give this analogy. Let's say we're running a mile and someone allowed you to run 50 yards ahead. Okay. And then they pull the trigger and then tell you to go. Now, while you're going, you constantly have somebody yelling at you. Hey, you got somebody trying to trip you up, trying to push you out your lane. So your hardship is a little bit different than a person that's already had that 50-yard advantage. Now, my thought process is this. It seems to me that instead of black men and women being able to say, let's have a plan to move forward. Let's have a plan to build our communities. Let's have a plan to keep our families healthy and build generational wealth. Let's talk about building businesses along with those communities. Hey, let's focus on what type of education we need, what type of institutional knowledge we need in order to grow. And it seems it's so difficult for us to sit down and say, let's work together. Like for some reason, there's a line drawn in the sand. And, women like Cynthia G's are saying, well, black men are not living up to the standards they're supposed to be living up to. They're not being protectors. They're not being role models. And they're damn sure not being providers. And my thought process, we know that there are, black men that are doing those things or whatever. But we ain't looking at individuals. We're looking at collective. And when you talk about collective, can you imagine how long it would take for all black men to sit down and say, we are now on the same accord. We're now going to take this one step in the right direction. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you all, but I agree with certain points that Taz made and certain points that Cynthia made in regards to black people needing leadership. And what's so difficult about it is right now with the access to everything in regards to social media, in regards to just mass media communication, period. It is so much out there that everybody's running their own race. Everybody's running their own race. You don't see Jay-Z saying, hey, this is what we need to do, and he's a multi-millionaire. Hey, you don't hear Beyonce saying this is what we need to do, and she's a multi-millionaire. Can you imagine if these couples came together, the Obamas, the Jay-Z's and Beyoncé's and all of these other power couples come together and sit down in the same room and say, what can we do for our black communities? For some reason, that line in the sand is keeping us segregated. It's keeping us fighting one another, questioning one another, bashing one another, pointing the finger at one another. I get it. Men should be out front leading. Unfortunately, what has happened is it's been a shift. It's been a shift in our family dynamic. It's been a shift in our work ethic and positioning and work to the point where now women are saying, well, I'm just as strong as you are. I'm making as much money as you are. So it's difficult to have a woman that's been a CEO of a company and say, fall back and listen to me. Well, she said, hey, I know as much as you know. You know, why should I listen to you? And then now with these circles of support, you know, your support systems, no one's telling you to be submissive to any man. When you hear a lot of people, a lot of women talking, they're not telling their girlfriends to be submissive to that man. No. You know what I'm saying? Any conversation about, okay, well, men should pay all the bills and women should, you know, do whatever they're going to do. And if they can't do it, and God forbid if they say anything about 50-50, the first thing that they're compared to is what white men do. And my thought process is like, okay, well, shouldn't families work together? Shouldn't families build together? Shouldn't families say, you know what, hey, we're going to do this together and everybody has a role? I think we're under this impression that, you know what I'm saying, men and women, especially black men and women, they come ready-made. They come ready-made for fatherhood. They come ready-made for relationships. They come ready-made entrepreneurs. They come ready-made just with knowledge overall. They come ready-made in reference to communication. They come ready-made in reference to love languages. They come ready-made great citizens. And that's not the case. These people need to be groomed and molded. Groomed and molded. And I wonder when they sit down and they listen to certain rhetoric that separates men and women, that says, well, you're not as good as white men are. You're not trying to build what white men have. I wonder, when does that encourage them to want to say, well, let me help this person build. Let me help this person accomplish. Because at the end of the day, it's about us and it's about the next generation, correct? I can have 100 strong women, but does that mean anything if you say we have 100 strong women, but 100 weak men? Well, who do you build with? Because it sounds great to have 100 strong women. Are you just going to build communities for women? Now let's jump into the Me Too movement. When you talked about, well, let's form the Me Too movement and say, you know what, women that are victims, young girls that are victims. Well, the Me Too movement forgot about young boys. They sat at a table and for some reason they said, we're not going to worry about young boys that's a victim. We're only going to worry about young girls and women. Can you imagine someone excluding, let's just say you have a son and a daughter, and saying, well, both of them were molested, but we only worried about the daughter. Now, granted, somebody would say, well, why aren't men starting these organizations? Why aren't men speaking out? And I believe that there are not a lot of men that tackle this subject, that tackle subjects like that. They're touchy. They're touchy. Does that make it right? It doesn't make it right. Should excuses be made for it? No excuses should be made for it. But at some point in time, I believe that we should sit down at the same table and say, what is our objective as Black people? What is our objective? Because going at each other, talking about what you ain't doing and what you ain't got and what you ain't accomplished and what you ain't do. Like at the end of the day, it's like we're still Black people. And no matter how much interracial dating we do, no matter how much finger pointing we do, what are we really accomplishing? Because I'm going to be honest with you. If I was a white person listening to this debate about what Black men aren't doing, what white women aren't doing, or what Black men aren't doing and what Black women aren't doing, I would look at it and say, we as a white race is winning. They can't even work together. They can't even be on the same accord. They can't even say, you know what, hey, I realize that we haven't been at our best. And that's what it is. I realize that we have not been our best. Now, whether that's Black men admitting that we haven't done everything that we can do, or whether that's Black women saying we haven't done everything we can do, or we're tired of doing everything, so they say, right? So now it's time to say, okay, let's come together and be united. Where is that conversation at? Thousands of people listening to these people break down how Black men have failed, how white women Black women have failed, but there's no conversation on let's work together. If Black women are so smart and educated, right, and Black men are this, that, and the other, whatever narrative you want to use, wouldn't it be more realistic to say let's just work together? Because we're the ones creating the kids, correct? We're creating these kids that's growing up in these single homes where the mother says, okay, well, hey, I'm working 2 jobs and, I'm trying to be mom and dad. I'm trying to be alpha and omega, and I'm trying to teach my son and my daughter X, Y, and Z. Well, isn't it time to sit down and say, let's just work together. Let's just work together. Let's keep white America out the picture and let us talk about what we need to do in order to build. But here's my thought process. It seems like the notation to build is out of the question. Like it has to be like we have to see all the Black men in the world gather together, almost like a 1,000,000-man march. And we have to see them do something in order to say Black women will now support you. And I just think that's an unrealistic situation. I just think that's almost like we're waiting for a meteorite to strike Washington, D.C. And once we see that anomaly, once we see that once in a lifetime situation, then that's when we'll act. That's the problem. We're making excuses. See, here's the thought process. Why not just do it? Can you imagine if Cynthia G and Nyla Sales and those who think like that in the women's sphere and also in the manosphere, can you imagine and say, you know what, let's stop all the fucking excuses. Let's stop pointing a finger. Let's stop saying I'm going to blame you for this. Let's stop saying you're lazy and you're this and you're that and doing all the damn name calling, and sit down and say, let's come up with the top 10 list of what we need to do to be successful. You feel like we need to open up more businesses? Let's do that. You feel like instead of working for people, we need to be entrepreneurs and teach people how to be successful? Let's do that. You think we need to sit down and talk about how to invest? Let's do that. What degrees we need to get? What conversations we need to have? There is no conversation about togetherness, and everything points to separation. Everything points to you're the blame, not I. And I think that there's a certain level of humility. I think there's a certain level of humbleness. I think there's a certain level of reprieve to say, you know what, man, hey, maybe this is not the way. If we've been going at it, you got to think about the men and women that have been attacking each other for years, making up all these names. Hey, you're this and you're that. Where has that gotten us? We talk about what Black men have achieved or what they have not achieved, but what has the Black race achieved? Because really, at the end of the day, regardless if you have black men not saying, "Oh, we're equal to white men," or "We're taking over," and that. Well, here's the thing. I find it very difficult for black men to overthrow the government, because essentially, we're talking about black men starting their own government in order to be respected by black women. Now, I would love to jump into a conversation with Cynthia G and Taz and Nala Sales. I would love to jump into conversation, because my thing about it is, what would be impressive to you? Because it's almost like when you have, let me use this for a minute. It's almost like when you have a baby mama who you guys don't get along, so whatever you do for the child ain't good enough, but when the new boyfriend comes in or new girlfriend comes in, whatever they do is just so amazing. So it's almost like, regardless of what you think black men haven't done, what can be done to be impressive? What can be done that is realistic? Because black men getting together all of a sudden saying, okay, well, we're going to start our own black nation. Okay, great. Well, my thought process, if women are educated and women are taking this role of, you know what, we're here now, hear me roar, you know what I'm saying, we're confident, we're sophisticated, you know, we're sexy, we're mothers, we're business owners. If my whole thing, why exclude you from the conversation? Why exclude you from the work? Why exclude you from creating the standards or steps ahead? There are plenty of women out there that are CEOs that come up with business models and work out business plans and all this great stuff. So now when it's time to sit down, and they say great minds think alike, but when great minds come together, my thing about it is, why leave it to the men to do it? If you feel like men are failing, then why not say, hey, listen, let us sit down? For some reason, the us is not there. The us is not available. The conversation for us is not important. And that's what I guess I don't get. Maybe that's just me, and that's just the level of optimism that I have. But I feel like, why are we not having a us conversation? We've done the blame game. Hell, we've been very strategic and meticulous and ruthless, savage. We've done the blame game. We've come up with all types of great nicknames and, you know, little jokes and little finger pointing, and we've done that. People have been very successful and they've been gaining a lot of money. But my thought process is, right now, when you get a black man that says, hey, this is what I feel like we need to do. Well, is the first result to that is saying, well, let me question your sexuality. Let me question how many baby mamas you have. Let me question your credentials. And my thought process, well, my whole thing about it is, wouldn't it just be great to find 2 men and 2 women that says, hey, let's change the narrative. Let's change the narrative. We ain't got to agree on everything, but we're going to agree for the first 10 steps that we need to take in order to build. I'm willing to build. I'm willing to have the tough conversation. It's not about pointing fingers, because I know plenty of intelligent black women, just like I know plenty of intelligent black men. And the ones that I know, they just don't sit around saying, well, it's someone else's fault for the race. No, the race is responsible for the race. Not just the men, but also the women. Everybody has a part to play. And if you haven't been playing your part, or you've been overly doing your part, well, now my thought process is, how do you balance out the work? How do you balance out the effort? How do you get the conversation started to make people say, you know what, it's not about just the men doing something. It's not just about the women doing something. It's about all coming together and actually putting the effort to say, let's stop name calling and let's start building. Let's stop pointing the finger and let's start actually taking the steps that's going to unify us. But people get a kick out of kicking other people, saying that you're the blame. And to me, I find no rationale in that. Instead of trying to say your talking points need to be how you failed, why can't your talking points be how to build? If you're that intelligent enough to do all this research and say, well, let me pull this in, let me quote this, let me look up that definition, let me talk about this, let me do, that's great. But why, out of all of this research, it's not, at the end of the day, us building. It's not making us better people. Having the conversation about what's wrong and never providing solutions is an oxymoron. It's crazy. You're debating things that have happened, and here's the thing. I am not responsible for what men did before me. I'm only responsible for what I do. Every man and every woman, they're not leaders of people. Hell, some of them are not leaders of themselves. So we can't expect them to start a revolution. Now, there have been people that have died and have became martyrs based on what they believe in and the principles that they're fighting for, and that's great. I'm going to be honest with you, Cynthia G, Taz, Nyla Sales, and everybody else that shares these extreme ideas that somebody should be, or some gender should be in charge of this new revolution. I believe black people should be in charge of a new revolution. I believe if black people want to do better, then black people are going to work together. Let me say this for the people in the back. If black people want to do better, then black people are going to work together. You're not going to work at bashing one another. You're not going to work at coming up with catchy slogans to point out how wrong someone else is. I don't care if it's the manosphere or it's the womansphere. At some point in time, you got to say, we need to work together. And here's the thing. If a young person is listening to you guys, what is the resolution? What is the resolution? Again, it feels good to sit back and say, you're the blame. You're the problem. You failed. Okay, you got it out your system? You good now? You straight? Okay, great. Awesome. I'm saying that at some point in time, we need to build our communities. We need to love one another. We need to respect one another. We need to forgive one another. I ain't saying forget, but we need to have a certain level of humbleness. We need to have a certain level of, hey, you know what? We need to build. We need to build. Because I don't want it just to be all black men. I don't want it to just be all black women. We're separating the team, ladies and gentlemen. Once you separate the team, then what's left is to conquer and divide. To conquer and divide. Were black people given a head start, an advantage in America? No. Can we say that about other minorities? We can. But right now, the conversation is, why are we not building together? Why are we considering blaming each other as a course of action versus fixing what we say is broken? Communicating what we say that we're not talking about. Name calling and disrespecting one another is not going to produce anything but another generation that's going to be separated. Be the generation that's responsible for putting things together, taking the first step, providing solutions, promoting the nucleus of togetherness. Hey, this is just my small little follow-up to the debate. Again, I felt like the debate, it outlined a lot of great stuff. I just feel like, at some point in time, we need to get to solutions of building together. You know what I'm saying? And I don't care if what your denomination is, your faith, your religion, or, if you married to a white person. Or my thing about it is I just feel like we need to work together. We need to come up with a common denominator, a common ground to where we build together, because that's what's important. What are y'all thinking about that? What are y'all thinking about we building together, we coming up with a common denominator? It is great to hear all the back and forth between men and women in regards to discussion about building, because every time you have Women getting together, they have their discussion about building and what they think needs to be done. And every time you get men together, they have their discussion and what they need to be done. But for some reason, there's no common denominator. There's no ground that everyone sits at the table and says, hey, this is our list. Let's look at your list and let's make a list. Let's make a list. Because our list is going to affect not only this generation, but generations to come. We know 9 times out of 10 that, hey, this list is going to affect policy, generational wealth, how we think strategically, households in regards to family units being together, learning how to invest, learning how to actually communicate with one another, learning how to deal with more emotions versus just using anger as a means to say, well, this is what's going to win the conversation. A debate is not cursing you out. A debate is not disrespecting you. A debate is us outlining the facts, and let's see what happens at the end of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, we are behind the power curve as a black race. We are not pushing the ball forward. I don't care how much achievement you do individually. I don't care how much achievement you do gender-wise, but as a race, we're not footing the bill. There's a tab to be paid. I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm ready to pay this tab. But we got to be confident. We need people who are not only educated, we need people that are strategic, people that are willing to provide solutions. It's a lot of people willing to have a conversation. It's a lot of people willing to say, you know what? I got something I can add to the fire. Let me pour some fuel on the fire and showcase how the other person is wrong. So yeah, we can maintain the heat. We can maintain the heat. But we ain't trying to burn the house down. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for us to sit down and have the tough conversation. How do we lead together? How do men and women sit down at one table and say, what do we need to do? Pointing the finger at you is not going to empower me. Pointing the finger at someone else is not going to empower you. I don't know about y'all, but I'm ready to build. Think about it. Until next time, this is Mario J. This is Tough Love. Y'all adult up. Peace.
You're all a bunch of fucking assholes. You know why? You don't have the guts to be what you want to be. You need people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. So, what'll I make you?